Welcome aboard to the show. So happy to have you with us today.
Same here. Happy to be part of the show.
So I want to just throw a hard ball at you. What is the worst hiring mistake that you've made and that you've learned from? Open up your humbleness and vulnerability and share that with us today.
Okay, so when I was hiring for my initial team at Neem, I did the pretty much the practices I learned at the companies before Neem. So pretty much the practices at CarGurus and Techometrics. So basically, what I did is I created an interview process very tailored to the lead code style interviews. So basically, I was giving people like hard questions and getting them to solve in an X amount of time, and also trying to understand if they understand things like time complexity, space complexity really well. And I kind of thought I got some really cool and good candidates. And when we actually started building Neem, I figured that they were, instead of moving fast, the candidates was like over engineering a lot. I mean, it was like they needed a lot of time like figuring out like is this the right thing to do, and they needed like a lot of hand holding to really understand are they on the right path. So then what I did is like those people that initially hired did not work for me, even though in theory in paper and through interviews they stood out like stellar candidates. But when it came to actual building a startup, they were not the right candidates.
Why do you think that was? I mean, if they did very well on kind of a technical test, you saw very strong technical acumen. What was the gap between that and execution?
Yeah, so basically they could solve like really hard problems in a really good way. But when it came to decisions like speed versus value, they couldn't make those decisions pretty much, right? So I had to constantly keep telling them, I mean, you could do all this, but you'll be wasting a lot of time.
Hmm.
And also choosing on like flip flopping between technologies. So they do like they start on saying that okay, this is a good idea, and then later like they figure out okay, this may not be a good idea, so scrapping everything and starting from the scratch. I mean, these are all acceptable in big companies like Google, but when it comes to a small startup, you're racing against the clock. So you need to think about also all the pros and cons beforehand, and um, and you should be in a good place to say, okay, I can do X amount of work in X amount of time. So and you need to commit to that, and you need to stick to that deadline, and you cannot move the deadline, and that's very important in a startup where you're racing against the clock. And this is something I didn't find in those candidates, even though they could solve problems.
How did you change your process and your thinking to get basically people that can deliver under stress, under a timeline, inside of the entrepreneurial constraints?
Yeah. So I knew these people could work. I tried to make them understand this is how we should operate, and they could not. So initially, I mean, at the end of the day, I had to fire them, and saying that it just didn't work. And then I had to find new people. So when I was going back to the market and finding the new team that I wanted to build, so what I did is like I took questions that I dealt in directly, and
Hmm.
I told them, okay, I gave them the exact same problem that we had in Neem. I told them, okay, just solve it for me, or how would you solve it? Pretty much. Uh, and I encourage them to like come with different alternatives and pick a solution that works best for them.
It almost seems a very similar kind of context of a test, right? But what was the difference between the fact that now it was contextual on your problems as opposed to generic algorithm problems? Why did
Yeah.
that make a difference?
So I also changed the way in which the test is conducted. What that meant is that I asked them to like come up with the stack that we use. So basically, we were using a Spring Boot stack. So I asked them like come prepared with an IDE with Spring Boot loaded with this version and with this database. And I wanted them to actually write those APIs. And they sent me the code. I ran it. I made sure that those worked so that like they are just not good at like explaining algorithms. They can actually deliver the product.
Nice. And what did you see? How did that work out?
So and I so and it's a problem which they had to solve in like 2 hours. So the way I would do it is I would come in, give them the problem, I would log off. They are free to do whatever they want. They just have to keep the recording on the Zoom meeting,
Mm,
so they're not pressurized by someone looking at them.
mm,
Uh, so they would do the work on their own. Then I would come back after 2 hours, hop in. I would run the code, like test the code with them live, and I'll also ask them like, okay, what made you write this kind of code, and what made you take all these decisions? So yeah, I mean, since they delivered the code in the 2 hours, it gives me confidence. Okay, they are just not like doing like boilerplate algorithms. They can actually write code and deliver in X amount of time.
And did you go and look at those recordings and kind of think through how they were actually got from point A to point B, or as long as it worked, you were happy with that?
I kind of looked if they were cheating.
Mm,
I told them it's okay. Like you can go and go look at other websites like Stack Overflow. You can even ask ChatGPT. I don't care. Like get all the help that you need. But I just didn't want someone else doing the code for them. So as long as they did it, and I saw them like typing the code, I see the progression. I think that was good. But end of the day, like they were able to understand why they wrote it. I mean, they were able to
mm,
explain why they wrote that code. And I mean, I gave the code where like you have to think in terms of like even about the business problem. So it's
right.
just not about the API that they write. Okay, they need to think about the business problem. So they, I mean, sometimes they would send me an email saying that I don't understand this. Can you come back,
Mm,
uh, call and explain to me why this is needed or how this should work? And I would come back and explain it to them. And when they come in, once it is explained and final product, if that actually matches at least 80% of what I'm looking at, then yeah, I would think it went well. And those kind of interviews worked really well for me rather than just
nice.
lead code style interviews.
Nice. So you found these great candidates. What were the secrets in, because managing heavy technical talent is a little different than other type sales marketing. What were the challenges and kind of secrets that you discovered in the process of kind of how to make it work with technical talent?
So yeah, I think the most important thing is like what I understood is that when you give a problem, like even if it's like a one-liner, I mean, it's an attitude like okay, it's like okay, I can get this done, right? I mean, if that attitude comes in right from the start, I think that is going to work really, really well. And I mean, first is okay, I'm going to get this done, the commitment. And then it's like, okay, if I'm stuck coming back to me, okay, I don't understand this. Or how do we solve this? Or like, okay, this doesn't make sense. How do we solve it? So it's the attitude like, okay, I can do this, or give me any problem, I'll solve it for you. Just give
Right.
me the problem.
Is that something you saw already in the interview process, or is it kind of a behavior or culture that you saw once you're working with the team member for a while?
So that's a trait I look for them in the interview. But I mean, across the people I've worked, I can see that the people with the attitude, okay, just give me the work, I'll get it done, right?
Hmm.
Uh, they have delivered more than others.
I
So,
I've had a problem where some of the talent, I mean, I get from a lot of people, oh yeah, no problem, any challenge. But then when you start working with them after the interview process, you're actually kind of in the day to day, suddenly all the excuses come up. Have you noticed that kind of difference between pre-hire, post-hire, or has it been kind of consistent for you?
I have, I mean, there's a candidate kind of exhibited that, like, I mean, even though he could write good code and he could deliver things, um, the volume of work differed. So because this person had like this needed like this person would log off right at 5, and then like no other work is done. But even though like he or she like knows it's a startup, and sometimes you need to do an extra amount of work. So I've seen that like some people like stop at 5 and
Yeah.
they don't take an extra mile, but they don't go an extra mile. And there are also people like they only do what's committed and they don't go beyond it. Um, so, I mean, if it's a big team, I mean, you can take that your advantage. I mean, these people like sometimes seem to be like very thorough, even though the volume of work is low. So you can decide if something like you want to get it fast, you can give it to the other person. Something if you want like really thorough, you can give it to this person. But okay, it's gonna be. I mean, it's gonna come out eventually, but maybe not as fast as the other person.
Yeah, that's fair. What was interesting when I was managing a team at a forensics company, basically what we did is we had to reverse engineer binary particles. I noticed, and basically it's this moving line of binary particles, one after other. Each one is a different phone, right? I noticed one engineer could do 5, 6 of these per week, and then other engineers were doing one or two. And it just blew my mind how is it possible that some engineers are basically doing 3, 4, 5, 10x more than others? It blew my mind that how is this even possible? And I was sure I would pay maybe 30%, 40% more, but still I was getting a 4, 5, 6x return. So it was almost like I hired, two people for the price of one, even though I was paying them more money. Have you seen that difference between kind of good and just amazing engineering talent in how much they can produce?
Yes, 100%. I mean, but again, like some engineers who are like super fast. I mean, at some point there is, uh, I mean, they don't always deliver at 100% quality all the time. So I think there is always a trade-off. I mean, some are really, really fast, but they kind of tend to overlook few tests here and there. But I think it's nothing crazy, like nothing like something that breaks production. But maybe one edge case has been missed or two edge cases has missed. But 90% of the functionality they would deliver in the first go. But the other person who would be slightly slower, uh, I mean, there are cases where they would still deliver bad code, but there are people who are more thorough. But I mean, if you end up in a place where okay, this person is slow plus they are not thorough, I mean, then again, it's a bad sign, right? But if this person is slow, but again, quality is much better,
Right.
then it's fine. Then you can use it to your advantage when you need them. But yeah, I've seen all cases. I've seen all the three cases I've spoke about. So yeah, you would want to retain the ones that uh, could be slow but high on quality. But if the
Yeah, that's
delivery is
fair.
slow and the quality is bad, yeah, you.
Yeah, that's very fair. I mean, we do see a trade-off. I think, of course, what you absolutely want to, and what surprises me that the headhunters and kind of the HR community, they don't understand this difference that that kind of an average versus a good programmer sometimes can be 3, 4, 5, 10x. And what's really scary is that a bad programmer will completely destroy your code base. Like they will create havoc and wreck, and you will not recover from it without a lot of work. Um, so that it's something that is, I think, to a certain degree, to us, not surprising, but to the muggles out there, the non-techies, it's surprising that there's such a huge gap in the industry.
Yeah, I've also worked with people who very fast, but any commits would break production.
Hmm.
So I mean, you would know that in a week. I mean, you can try to train them a little bit, like moving to writing some tests and kind of stuff. And yeah, if that you don't see that working in the first 2 3 weeks or a month, that's not going to work out.
What's the in your experience the position of kind of process, right? The CI/CD, the code reviews. How much of that affects the overall quality as opposed to really just hiring great talent that knows what they're doing?
I think, I mean, code reviews could definitely catch a lot. I mean, there are kind of programming models like domain-driven programming where I mean you can push a lot to the compiler. I mean, in those kind of frameworks, I mean, I think it might be able to catch uh, a lot of like basic programming mistakes like null pointer exceptions and kind of that. But real logic mistakes, I don't think unless you're like a CTO kind of role where you know the product very well as well as you know the code. I don't think you could capture a lot of logical mistakes. But if you have a product knowledge, like if you're a product owner plus a technical manager, I mean, you can catch a lot. But I don't think a lot of companies have that kind of roles. But luckily, Neem is a small company. Like I'm actively part of the product role as well, so I know the product really well. So I'll be able to look at the logic and be able to do that for um, code reviews. But let's be honest. I mean, if the code review is massive, then you need a lot of patience to like really go through each and every one of it. So, I mean, at that point, like it, you might as well code it yourself. So, I mean, best thing to do at that point is like get the code and test it out.
Do you,
So,
do
yeah,
you,
go ahead.
do you find yourself relying in that case more on kind of test to development philosophies or unit testing? Like what's your philosophy when it comes out to making sure that you're getting high quality that really meets the requirements as opposed to kind of having that fuzziness?
Yeah, so two things that we look at. I mean, first thing is to understand the basic the workflow works. And for that, you definitely have to write unit tests, and we also write end-to-end testing, which is like UI based. Use Playwright framework, and um, something is very solid, and you don't want to break that flow at all. Yeah, we write E2E tests. But anything other than that, like to defeat the purpose of like getting the code in and then testing it out, we try to create tasks small as possible, and we try to create the PRs as small as possible. I mean, sometimes it is possible, sometimes it is not. So we try to do it as much as possible so that the PRs are manageable. I know there are like technologies out there which can split PRs into manageable ones, but I mean, I've not found it super useful because again, like you need to make sense of out of all these layers, what like things like graphite create. So I would still like the engineers write smaller PRs rather than like all this PR splitting technology split the PRs. Um, yeah, so keep smaller increments of code change plus unit testing plus end-to-end testing. I think these are the three um, items that we use, and on top of that, like we use like um, push a lot of things to compilation, so that like obvious things can be caught. Plus, what we can do is yeah. So we have like a thing like our front end technology and our back end technologies are different. So we use Next.js on the front end. We use Java Spring Boot on the back end. So to make sure that the front end really understands the back end, we have a proprietary, I would say, uh, the web client building logic. So um, the front end web client, which actually calls the backend, is automatically generated. So it can capture like if the API is changed, that can break the front end. That process cannot understand that, and that process runs on CI/CD pipeline as well. So when it runs, yeah, if it creates a breaking change, it'll understand that.
Yeah, I'm always shocked when I see companies that are not doing CI/CD, not doing end-to-end automated testing, not doing regression testing. I'm almost in awe of how they're even able to get versions out. So I do think that there's a lot of value in the, in kind of, let's say, current CI/CD processes. They drive a lot of value. I want to shift the topic a little bit and kind of talk about management of the talent from
Mhm.
a perspective of keeping motivation high, showing them kind of paths forward for development. What is your philosophy? How do you make sure that your talent is really committed and kind of in it to win it and not disengaging or disconnected? What's the tips and tricks that you would give for success?
So one I would say is like make them really independent, make them part of the organization, like explain it to them in great detail why you're trying to build this and how it's going to help the customer, and even sometimes even talking to the customer. right? They need to be in the customer's shoes to really understand the pain. So that's the philosophy that I use to keep them motivated. And most of my engineers, as long as they solve really good problems, they are motivated, and I think that's key.
So when you think about managing the engineering talent, so they're in it to win it and not disconnecting, having them be really invested in the company and the vision, what are the tips and tricks? What do you do?
Okay, so first thing is like when I hire, I understand and I make sure that the talent I bring in like to solve good and challenging problems, and they are
Hmm.
motivated by good problems. And to make sure that they understand what we are doing and they understand the company's vision, like um, I give them like very high level tasks, so that they start thinking why they are doing this. And sometimes even I let them be on customer calls and let them hear from the customer directly, or we have like a intercom channel where customers like talk about their problems, or it's like a support channel that they have. So I assign it directly to my engineers so that they understand the pain firsthand from the customers. And sometimes some of my engineers, they come to me themselves saying that, okay, this is what we should do,
Hmm.
right?
That's so incredibly important. I see a lot of companies that engineering is so disconnected from the business problems that they just don't have the ability to make these good business decisions because they have no knowledge. But on the other hand, what you're doing, it really empowers them to go in the right direction without asking for guidance. They kind of have those insights. And I mean, let's face it, these engineers are incredibly intelligent, incredibly capable. Why wouldn't they be able to figure out the business environment? Like it's a no-brainer. So I really appreciate what you're doing. To me, at least, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people would think it's obvious for the engineers, but it isn't. I mean, they are not in the customer's shoes. They don't
Yes.
they don't speak to the customer. I mean, it's very hard for someone not to relate with the pain until they hear it firsthand.
Yeah.
And even if I write something, they have their own interpretation of it. I mean, to understand the real interpretation, why it came and how it came, they need to be in the customer's shoes, and the
Yeah.
best way to do that is like have them hear it directly from the customer,
From the
or have a product person explain it exactly how the customer feels it.
Yeah, from the horse's mouths, so to say. I think I want to just call out something that you said that I think that's incredibly important. When they hear it from the customer and they get that kind of compelling pain from them, they feel the pain. That actually motivates them because now they're not doing something off some kind of spec or piece of paper or Jira or whatever. They are actually supporting a real human being. So that also increases the motivation, right? That intrinsic motivation, so important. I mean, these are really really important items. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. um I want to make another shift. I'll tell you, the first time I had to fire, this was my first engineer I ever fired. I didn't sleep for nights. Like it's an incredibly difficult task. Obviously, to be fired is difficult. To be the manager firing is difficult. It's just a bad situation all across. How do you what are the things that you can do to make it better, both from a cultural perspective, but also from a process perspective when you think about letting go of team?
I mean, first and foremost, what I think is important is that I mean, firing is something you don't want to do. I mean, it should be a last resort. But I think every entrepreneur kind of needs to learn this. I mean, it's better to let the engineer go as early as possible rather than keeping a bad engineer on board. I wouldn't say bad engineer, someone who's not the right fit, right? I mean, he could be an incredible engineer somewhere else, but I mean, just not for our company. So I think all entrepreneurs will learn that at some point. I mean, you make these decisions as quickly as possible. It's better because, I mean, when you know it's not working out, and um, and if something were to turn right, and it would happen really fast. I mean, if you take a month or two to figure out, I mean, you're on the wrong path. And as and when you become seasoned, you will get better at this. But the first thing I would want to say is like not making it like a real surprise, like out of the blue this happened. But I think communication and feedback is very important. So you, as soon as something is delivered or something is not going right, you tell them exactly what is happening, what is expectation. This is what you should be doing. Um, and once you know this is like communicated very clearly and they understand, and um, and it happens again and again, I mean, most likely like the person itself would say, maybe I'm not the right fit.
Hmm.
And this has happened to us as well. So where I'm saying like, I'm sorry.
And that's a critical point. I mean, what I see is that some people are like, everything's fine until the annual review, and then suddenly everything is not fine. I think that surprise of not having clear, transparent communication, which is frequent, is such a mistake. So I love your approach to it. How do you know the difference between, okay, this is a situation where you can work with the engineer to grow, to develop, to overcome the challenges, and this is just a situation where we need to find a better fit? Is there some, I don't know if to say easy, but if are there some clear indicators on when to make which decision?
So one of the indication is like quality and speed. So let's say you see an engineer on your team delivering tickets at, let's say, at Y speed, and a very similar task if the other engineer is taking, uh, let's say, 2x more iterations and 3x more time, okay, something is not right. So
Yeah.
again, you can talk to the person. I mean, we expect this to be done in X amount of time. This is too much. Or someone whose promises saying that, okay, I'm going to get this done by this time. And on that day, they are saying that, okay, my approach is not right. This is not going to work. I need to redo the whole thing. Or someone who committed something and they comes back to me saying that, okay, I didn't think this through. Whatever we decided is not going to work, so we have to do something else. And if this is a pattern like you see very regularly, uh, something's not working. And maybe the other thing is like I've seen engineers who break every time they touch code.
Hmm.
Um, so, and when it happens, I mean, some people own up to it, some people blame others. I mean, the people who blame others is a clear signal. This is not working out. Some of the people who own up to it, yeah, okay, maybe you give them some direction and it might work out. Um, and the other thing is like, okay, the people who like, uh, let's say a task is being promised in 10 days. Day 3, they come to me saying that, okay, the approach I'm thinking may not work. So maybe add an extra day, but I'll still get it done. But if there's
Mhm.
someone who comes to on day 8 and saying that, okay, this is not going to work. I spent 8
Yeah.
days coding to a dead end. That is clearly not a good sign.
Yeah, that's very fair. So let me, I appreciate this. This has been my experience as well, right? You don't want, what I tell my engineers is no surprises, right?
Mhm.
And if you have a surprise, communicate it as soon as you figure it out, right? That's so I appreciate that. I want to flip the script. As a early career, mid-career engineer, how do I work on myself to really get to where I want to be? How do I figure out what are my weaknesses? What is the way to kind of become the super engineer, so to speak?
Um, Super engineer is a tough one, but I would say going from maybe like junior to senior, I mean, I think I can answer that better. Um, so I think, yeah, two things I would differentiate a senior engineer or someone whom I can trust is um, the analogy that I use is like, yeah, everybody can navigate a ship during calm waters.
Hmm.
Okay, but it's incredibly difficult to navigate the ship during a storm. So I think only experience can give you that. Um, so what I mean by storm is like something is broken in production. and your
Yeah.
customers are not able to treat your customers. Your clients are not able to treat your customers, and they're waiting for the app to come up. So someone who's a junior level engineer may not be able to, even at that high pressure situation, may not be even able to think, okay, how can I debug this? Where do I look? I mean, the pressure will be coming in from the customers, pressure will be coming in from the CEO. So this is where like seasoned engineers can drive the ship or be the captain.
Yeah. There,
Um,
there's. Do you think that? I mean, we're so abstracted today from low-level programming that part of my fear is that engineers don't really understand what's happening under the virtual machine, under the Lambda, under whatever it is. Do you feel that having a deeper knowledge of how computer works, how compilers work, how databases work, how JVMs work, all these things, do you feel like that knowledge, because it's kind of missing in many cases, it's preventing people from really understanding the pipelines and kind of having those deep insights? Or do you feel that's not part of the problem?
I mean, definitely, if you ask me, the more you know and more deeper you know your technologies and your stack, easier it is for you to figure out what it could be. But I would say like seasoned engineers need not necessarily have to know all that from the get go
Hmm.
to really understand it. But they need to have that thought process. Okay, okay, this exception is happening or this error is happening, so it could be because of this. So now they can even go to ChatGPT or dig deeper into that area and figure out what could be going on. Um, so again, I don't think I answered my other question. So basically, I would always tell a junior engineer. So be in an environment where you can experience an outage, where you can experience something like a breakdown, and just not write code, so that you know what it's like to steer the ship in during a storm. And I think that is extremely important, even though it happens only like once in a year. I mean, that is the reason why I'm paying you extra, because I know I can depend on you if that happens, even if I'm not there, right? So in order to do that, yeah, you need that experience. You need to go through like every permutation and combination of configuration or code, or the hardware software combinations. You need to at least see or experience a good percentage of it.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, I would always say like, yeah, if you can be part of a projects where something that is built from the ground up, do it. um, I mean, if you have experience, I mean, if you have a chance to be part of every part of the stack, like when I mean like be part of infrastructure decisions outside of basic coding, like, yeah, if you can be part of all that, yeah, be part of it. Learn more, understand more, use your time and understanding the technologies deeper. And yeah, that's how I think you can become from a junior to a senior. And I've seen like people who are not that experienced who work at a senior level.
Mm.
It's a pure passion.
I appreciate that. I want to do a small shift. We are getting bombarded with security issues all the time. I don't know if it's true or not, but maybe more than ever. And we've seen productization of basically threat actors taking security attacks and productizing them. And basically now you can call up a support line on how to execute phishing and malware attacks. So the organized crime has kind of taken it to a whole new level of operation. What does that mean for startups trying to just develop software? What do we need to do in this kind of environment where it's dangerous, especially when we talk about healthcare information? If a healthcare organization gets hacked, that could be terminal for that organization. So there's a lot at stake here in healthcare, financial, etc. How do we even approach this problem?
So thanks to like, if you are hosted in like AWS, thanks to AWS, like they do have products that look for vulnerabilities, that look for code scanning. So I mean, you could be an experienced person, so you could implement solutions by yourself. But if you're not, I mean, I would say um, make use of technologies and frameworks provided by your cloud provider out of the box. Um, and you can also have like sessions with experts from AWS to review your infrastructure setup and make sure they're all good. And also, AWS can provide recommendations on like what is best for the product depending upon what you have. So make use of all free tools that are available there. Okay, so make sure that you don't miss a basic warning from AWS, and make sure there's a vulnerability open. That's the first thing. Second thing is like make sure all your packages or the libraries that you use are like always up to date. Uh, and the other thing is like authentication and authorization, all that stuff. I mean, one, you could build it yourself. I mean, but if you're not confident in like building that by yourself, I mean, I would say always outsource it to something that is constantly refreshed and kept up to date. So at Neem we use Auth0. Um, so yeah, use a provider that is extensively good and have a good reputation. So outsource that as much as possible uh, in terms of security. And the other thing I would say is like as and when you find time, learn about it, read more about it, keep yourself up to date because you need it, and create policies that are in line with industry standards. At Neem, we have taken a few extra steps, pretty much like we are HIPAA compliant and we are SOC 2 type 1 compliant. So we made sure that we adhere to all the regulations that are already in place um, to qualify for these certifications. So when you don't know, yeah, these are the best places to start, I would say.
Yeah. I have one last question. Believe it or not, this has been a lot of fun. We've already out of time. This is the only scripted question we have in the program, but it's a difficult question because it's a personal one.
Mhm.
If you had to go back to 20-something-year-old Tarun, what would you advise him?
Um, I mean, financially, I would say I've tried to time the market a lot, and
No stock tips. That's cheating.
no, I'm
Um,
saying again, go back to the basics, go to the industry standards, go to practices that have worked over time. So again, like personally, I would say um, don't try to outsmart the world. Just follow what the smart people have done. Um, that would be my advice to myself. I mean, you're not the smartest person in the world. I mean, you could be, but that's a very tough battle to fight. So yeah, I would say yeah, I would tell myself don't try to outsmart the world. Follow the best practices.
Tarun, thank you so much for joining the show today. It was an absolute delight. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Same here.